4, 3, 2, unité, top.
You are watching Vega Flight VV-18, which is, as of this moment, one of 4 rockets that were launched in 2021 by Arianespace, Europe's largest and the world's first commercial launch service provider. Having $1 billion in revenue in 2020 and having held at least 60% of the market share for commercial launch services in 2014, Arianespace would seem like its position in the space launch industry could be potentially lucrative when the space economy is teeming with potential for growth. However, this position is only a figment, and Arianespace's weakening position in the growing space sector may actually reflect a weakening European position, not only for the commercial launch industry itself, but also for many other potential profitable European space industries and companies. For the past few years, Arianespace's market share has declined, and it shouldn't be a surprise what caused it.
Looking from this side of the Atlantic, you appear to have put a bit of a frightener on Europe. Ministers are meeting in the next few days to consider upgrading or even replacing the Ariane rocket. What's your view when you look across the Atlantic?
Ariane 5 has no chance. I mean, really, I don't say that with a sense of bravado, but there's really no way for that vehicle to compete with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. So if I were in the position of Ariane, I would really push for an Ariane 6. I think that's the right move.
It's about price, isn't it? I mean, and you have really come in very, very low. Can you sustain those prices? Are they realistic?
Yes, absolutely. Not only can we sustain the prices, the next version of Falcon 9 is actually able to go to a lower price. So if Ariane can't compete with the current Falcon 9, it sure as hell can't compete with the next one.
With the advent of Falcon 9, launch costs have reduced, and following simple supply and demand, SpaceX's market share in the commercial launch market, particularly for launching satellites, has risen. And this can produce problems for Arianespace.
And we are here to talk about the space race of the 21st century. Forget the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union a few decades back. This race is about the market to launch satellites into space. The market leader is the France-based company Arianespace, but its competition is about to get a lot tougher. Joining me here now is the chief executive of Arianespace, Stéphane Israël. Thank you very much indeed for being with us today. Now, just for our viewers who may be unfamiliar with what it is that you do, your business model is essentially to put satellites into space.
Yes.
SpaceX's role in gobbling up market share for satellite launches is of particular importance, not only because satellite launches play a major role in producing contracts for launch services, harming Arianespace in the process, but SpaceX's Starlink also stands to crowd out the satellite industry. SpaceX is currently releasing low Earth orbit satellites, which can provide good broadband connection for areas that don't have easily accessible Wi-Fi, and this can be an extremely lucrative industry, having the potential to reap billions for SpaceX each year. Morgan Stanley, one of the world's largest investment banks, estimated that satellite broadband will represent around 50% of the projected growth of the global space economy by 2040, an industry that could generate more than $1 trillion in revenue. If a foothold is lost in the satellite broadband industry, this could be potentially dangerous for European growth. If scale and vertical integration works like economics teaches us that it will, SpaceX further embedding itself in the satellite production chain will only drive down its costs, which will inevitably drive demand because of lower prices. Although Europe is known for space independence, particularly with Copernicus and Galileo, Europe is simply behind in terms of capital investment into space ventures, which would give Europe a greater chance for reaping the benefits of a growing space economy. The EIB, the European Investment Bank, has found that many European companies trying to invest and begin something in space are often finding difficulty in getting venture capital funding within Europe, and this can result in space entrepreneurs looking for private capital outside of the EU. Although this may be a further stretch to make, it represents a problem of keeping European companies connected with the land they come from, with many innovative European companies or founders, especially in the tech sector, getting acquired by US rivals and as a result, acquired away from Europe. Grabbing onto space growth is beneficial because it means employment, more tax revenue, and positive feedback loops for further investment. Being in a top position in the new space race is undeniably lucrative, and Europe must keep up with the industry if it wants to reap the benefits of this growth. It's also important to understand that even if launch costs may be reduced by SpaceX, it wouldn't be fair to argue that Europe will completely lose its position. It's not as though the European Space Agency will suddenly abandon Arianespace for launches and focus primarily on cheaper commercial space companies in other countries. A European route to space will still exist, be it lucrative or not. However, just because European space organizations will stay besides other European space organizations, this does not mean that Europe's autonomy in space will remain constant. Multiple countries are investing in defense technologies based in space, and many of them have interests that are deeply at odds with European values. Although losing on the broadband industry mentioned before could cause a loss in autonomy in itself, particularly for economic growth, autonomy in space can be measured through other developments. Access to European satellites is beyond the value they provide to an economy, but it's also the assets they produce that provide value in the first place. Satellites can provide access to tremendous amounts of data, information on the environment, communication tools, and necessary information on EU security. Having mainly external broadband satellite infrastructure outside of Europe would be the same as having all data centers clustered outside as well, which would produce a reliance external to Europe's borders, which is safe to say not something that Europeans who want solidarity and autonomy within their borders will likely want. However, the European Union is taking steps to keep up, with large pushes by Thierry Breton, the Commissioner for the EU Internal Market, and also whose responsibility is maintaining the EU's autonomy in space. There's been a push for more EU solidarity in space, and the European Union in April 2021 approved the adoption for the EU space program, setting in motion the largest European budget for space ever, 14.88 billion euros, encompassing EU space activities alone. Also, the ESA has invested in research for testing full-stage reusable rockets, which may make Europe's launch industry stay competitive if it can be done fast enough. However, the United States still invests magnitudes more in government-funded budgets and contracts alongside space sector finance through venture capital. Although Europe is doing the right thing to remain relevant in the space age, it may need to do more if it wants to stay on top.